We've got an interview with MaryKay Dreisilker today. And MaryKay has been working with Legion for a few years now. She's also a coach at South Loop Strength and Conditioning. She finished 35th in the Open this year for her first CrossFit Games qualification. And in this interview, we talk about some sanctional stuff, all kinds of things like that are sort of a moving target as the situation with COVID-19 plays out. So some of that stuff is going to be a little bit out of date, but the overall content of this interview, I think, is still pretty relevant. So check this one out and enjoy. Welcome to the Legion Strength and Conditioning Podcast. You can check us out at legionsc.com or follow us on Instagram at legion.sc.
All right, guys, welcome to the Legion Strength and Conditioning Podcast, episode 35-ish. Today we are with
probably 42.
Don't interrupt my intro. It sounds terrible now. I'm not redoing it. This is it. Today we're with MaryKay, recent CrossFit Games qualifier through the 2020 Open, soon to be last place finisher at West Coast Classic sanctional event. And we're just going to talk a little bit today about kind of MK's background and how she got into CrossFit and what she's done over the past few years to get to the level she's at now. So MK, introduce yourself. Tell us, who are you?
Oh boy. Hello. I'm MaryKay. I started, do you want me to go into I don't want to talk about my whole story right now, or what do you want to know?
All right. Well, let's go simple. I'm going to shoot some fast questions at you and I need fast answers.
Okay. I'll do my best.
All right. How old are you?
29.
Okay, I started with an easy one, and you hesitated way too long. What sport did you do before CrossFit?
I did gymnastics most of my life up until my senior year of high school. And then when I was in college, I played ultimate frisbee for 7 years.
Nice.
In college and after college, so before I started CrossFit.
What was your specialty in gymnastics?
I didn't really at the club level. You compete all the events. It's not like college where you specialize in anything.
Okay.
But I would say maybe one of my favorite events was floor, so tumbling.
Yeah, I've seen you take naps before. You are good on the floor.
I do love naps.
How has the gymnastics training sort of growing up helped you in CrossFit? What are the sort of things that you found that you've taken to a little bit easier as you've sort of got into CrossFit and got into competitive CrossFit?
Well, definitely
I think it definitely helped by fucking your knee up and making squatting hard.
Yep, tore my ACL playing frisbee my freshman year of college. So, but I've been working on it. My squat, Todd, you've seen it. My squat has improved a decent amount. And my right quad is a lot better, or is a lot stronger because of always squatting to my right side. But anyway, back to the gymnastics question. When I first started CrossFit, handstands were really easy. That was and handstand walking wasn't really a problem for me, but learning how to properly do a handstand push-up was that I was able to kind of adjust to that relatively easily. And then bar work. So I remember being able to figure out a bar muscle up because it's essentially a little bit different than a kip, a gymnastics kip. But it took me a long time to be good at ring muscle ups because girls don't do rings. So I remember probably the first day ever trying to do a front support on the rings, I was incredibly shaky. So I've had to work really hard on the rings to get proficient at ring muscle ups. So, but having that body awareness and just knowing how to move my body in space and everything that I learned through gymnastics definitely has helped throughout all of CrossFit movements.
So yeah, I mean, You hear a lot of people saying that gymnastics is going to help with lots. You see weightlifters doing tumbling and things like that at like a young age in places like China and Russia. So you can sort of see that there's the sort of skill transfer there. What has been sort of one of the sort of more difficult things for you to develop throughout your sort of CrossFit career?
What's the hardest thing that's been?
Yeah, I mean, it could be the hardest skill, or has there been any sort of area which you've actually had to like really work on?
I don't know, John. What do you think has been one of my biggest struggle points?
One of that's tough. Running.
Oh yeah, aerobic. Everything with gymnastics was, like under 90 seconds to 10 to 20 seconds. So getting used to running longer distance, biking, rowing, like those are definitely probably my weaker points.
So what does the trajectory look like for you as a competitive athlete, going from both starting CrossFit from like day one into deciding to take CrossFit more seriously up until the point where you're at now?
Well, when I first started CrossFit, I was starting because my parents got me a Groupon for the gym that was down the street from me. And so when I first started, I was just like, wow, it was like everything that I felt like I had been looking for, like since I quit gymnastics. And so like when I had that kind of competitive spirit back again, I like got very, very into CrossFit. I was going to classes 5-6 days a week. I was like, watching the leaderboard, trying to see if I could like see how far I could push myself. So like right away, I kind of had that competitive spirit again. But so I did CrossFit for a year while I still lived at home in the suburbs. But then when I moved to Chicago, I actually took like a 6-month hiatus before finding another gym again. So once I restarted CrossFit, it was kind of the same trajectory again. I was really serious about going to class, 5-6 days a week. And at a certain point, I was, trying to RX plus workouts or do heavier than prescribed, or, just always trying to push myself to be better. And so it wasn't until like my first actual open that I did all the workouts was in 2017. And it was after that open that I actually had some friends at my gym that were like, hey, like, you're decent at this, you should go to South Loop, you should find a coach. And I was just like, I was such a like newbie that didn't know what that process of becoming more competitive looked like. So I was just kind of listening to some of my friends who had been in CrossFit for longer than I had. And I was just like, okay, like I'll go reach out to the owner of South Loop. And then that was when I got in touch with John, met with John for the first time. And I was like, so I guess I'm decent, like let's see what I can do if I have some more structured programming. And so that was like my first step towards being more competitive outside of just classes. And so, it was because I was in May of 2017, and then it was a year later that I was able to qualify to regionals. And so and then from regionals to now, qualifying for the 2020 games. So basically from that time that I started having a coach, having John program for me, my life, a lot of lifestyle changes have happened. So, having my life more revolve around training, and then slowly, changing my nutrition, changing my sleep, changing, what my day-to-day looks like has evolved as, I've made progressions in the sport.
What do you?
There you go. Look.
Yeah. What do you feel like has been the sort of made the areas that you changed in terms of lifestyle factors that have had the sort of most positive impact on your performance, or has it sort of been, like an accumulation of all of them?
It's definitely been an accumulation of all of them. Like one of the first big change that I made was I got a nutrition coach and started getting my nutrition on track, tracking macros. And I was immediately able to see changes both body composition wise, but then also in my performance. And back in 2017, when I was just doing the open for fun, I was going out a lot. Friday night lights, we'd go out for tacos and margaritas I was definitely not in a super conscious place of focusing on training in any sense. But once I started having that narrower focus on training, nutrition was a big thing. And then I remember being I need to get to sleep on time. So I'm pretty sure it was before the open in 2018 that I made a big adjustment on sleep, making sure I was going to sleep. And then after that, probably mindset. That's been a huge game changer for me, and both with training and with my whole life, with what I do for work, and everything. I've just kind of been able to morph my whole life into things that I love to do. So I love to coach. I coach full time. I do personal training full time. And so kind of making all those other factors of my life be conducive to training and my goals for CrossFit. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah. I think yes, you see it quite a lot with people. They obviously, they make their lives sort of fit around training to sort of a certain extent, whether it's sort of whether it's changing up your coaching hours, or whether it's actually, I know of some people who have actually gone into the world of coaching because they sort of wanted to pursue to be more competitive. What would you say has sort of been the biggest things that you've actually had to change in terms of other things going on in your life to sort of allow for this this journey you've had with competitive CrossFit?
I think the biggest aspect that I've changed has been my job. So when I first started working with John, I was working as a personal trainer up at a studio that was really far away, and I wasn't happy there. So I quit and wanted to start my own personal training business. So I started doing my own personal training along with coaching, and I was working at 2 different gyms. And then when I realized that I didn't want to be at 2 different gyms anymore, it wasn't really working for me, I focused only on being at South Loop. And so I've went, like I said, when there's been something in my life with work that I was I'm no longer happy with this, and I don't think that this isn't making me feel good anymore, I've made the decision to change it. And when I talk to other people about this, they're it's kind of surprising, because I've been way more go with the flow. I just want to see what happens, and I hope that this works out. Whereas I feel like some people can be of the mindset I need to know exactly what this next step is going to look like. I need to know exactly what my 6-month progression is here, or a year progression. And I've just always been I'm not happy. I'm going to move on to the next thing. I need to do what makes me feel good. And so those decisions have actually been really easy for me in order to move forward. And it wasn't necessarily because I was I need to focus on my training, I need to do this. It was just, I want to be happy with my life. And I think that when your whole life is kind of you feel good and kind of aligned with what you're doing, that has come through in my training to that, I feel good on a regular basis. I'm getting enough sleep. I'm able to, eat enough, because I kind of have all these things in place that I've kind of created for myself.
Oh, yeah. So kind of on that point, obviously, no, you're not always going to be 100% on in training. You're going to have bad days. It's not always going to go perfectly to plan. how do you adjust on a kind of session to session basis, or even like a movement to movement basis? Like I know from what you text me and like texts I get today, where one part of a session may not go well for you. How do you kind of either compartmentalize or move on from that to not let it ruin the rest of your training day, or to let it hit the rest of your training week?
I think that one of the most important things with like your entire life, not even just specific to training, is kind of having like a really quick rebound rate. Like that's what I call it. Whereas like I texted you today about how my snatches didn't go how I wanted them to. And, I was upset and I was down on myself and I was frustrated for like maybe 30 minutes. But then I'm like, okay, well, this is why we practice. This is training, what, and I had a notebook and I was like, what can I learn from this? And like wrote a bunch of stuff down of like different things to focus on. And then I was done with it and moved on to the next workout. And not every time is it going to be kind of that smooth transition of like frustrated place to, ready to kick ass at this next workout. Like there's for sure been times in my training where I call it like my cry corner. It's in like the back area of the gym where if I get really frustrated at something and I'm like, I need 5 minutes to go back there and just like let myself, just be upset. I think that that's an important notion, is not necessarily forcing myself to be like, no, don't feel this way. Don't be sad. Don't be frustrated. I think you have to let yourself feel that way because that's human. That's emotions. Like we're allowed to experience that. But then it's being like, okay, once you experience it, feel it, and then you can move on. So that's not just within training, but like also in other areas of your life. You're allowed to deal with stuff however you need to deal with, but then don't harp on it too long. Just move on from there.
It is interesting. Sorry, let me just jump in, Luke.
Is that sort of quick rebound rate? Is that something that you've developed whilst doing CrossFit, or is that something that you sort of like done before you got into CrossFit? Is it something you done when you were sort of, doing gymnastics or, in previous work and things like that?
I think that that's actually something that I've been consciously aware of more recently, just in like some of the books that I read or things that I listen to of being aware of your feelings, acknowledging them, and then being able to move on or like learn from it and move on. So that stuff, I would say that's definitely more recent that I've been consciously aware of making those decisions.
That's cool. What type of books have you been reading that sort of like triggered that type of thinking?
Oh man, I read a lot of self-development books and mindset books, and that's been something I've been really passionate about for the last like 2 years. And anything that I can kind of like get my hands on, I like to read a lot. I listen to a lot of podcasts about mindset, about, learning how our brains work, learning like where fear comes from, learning how to like not like, I was listening to one this morning about how like choosing to like worry and fear are like choices that we make. And it's like, because they're thoughts that we have, and we can kind of like choose what thoughts to have, and we can choose not to worry about something and how unnecessary that is. So, listening and kind of just like always filling myself up with those like positive information and just learning has been really, really crucial for my, CrossFit career, but also for myself as a person. I'm always trying to become a better version of myself and learning how I work and learning how we as humans kind of work has been beneficial.
I mean, you're definitely the most, I won't say emotional person by coach. But it is interesting, like the fact that you can have such varied emotions, but you're so good at separating those out from outcome and effort. So knowing that you can be upset to the point of tears in the gym with how something went, but then to be able to turn it around and then completely separate that from whatever else you're doing. And like we've talked about it before. Occasionally you'll just, take a day off of training. You'll just be like, okay, I need to take a day. And it's not necessarily a physical thing. It's not like, hey, I'm too beat up, I need a rest day. It's I need a mental day. I just need to be out the gym for a day. And I find it interesting. It's not something that I would personally be able to do for myself, because that's not necessarily how I function, and that's not how I kind of progress myself. But what works for you, and you know that, hey, if I take a couple of days away from the gym, I'm not going to get less fit, I'm not going to lose strength, but I'm going to come back mentally stronger, and I'm going to come back in a position that's going to allow me to get more out of my training.
Yeah, and I mean, having you as a coach who's very understanding of that, and kind of, when I text you and I'm like, I need this time, or like I need a day or whatever, and you've always been really understanding and not being like, hey, like you're missing out on training, like, and like kind of guilt tripping me into getting back into the gym. Like that's also helps me to be successful too, is having a coach who's understanding and, listens to me, or, is just.
Okay. So if you had to pick one phrase to describe me, would it be very emotionally supportive or not very emotionally supportive?
Oh, you're very emotionally supportive.
Phenomenal. That is unbelievable.
For me, I don't know what you're like with other people, but for me.
That's one thing as a coach. Like you learn what people need and what they do well with. And there are some people where, like yourself, where I know that, okay, if you tell me that, then you need a little time and you'll come back better for it. There are other people that I know I need to stay on them, and they're not going to benefit from just taking a day out of the gym. They need to kind of refocus and get back into training and not take a day off. So,
MK, have you ever sort of felt? I think this is something you see quite often when people potentially have sort of like misaligned values with their actions, and you see a lot of people putting a lot of focus on the training session. They go into the gym, they thrash themselves for 3 hours, but then everything isn't necessarily lined up in training outside of the gym. Have you ever sort of felt guilty for missing a day, or have you ever felt like you are missing out on something, or have you always just sort of generally been, okay, I'm going to take a day because I need it for me to sort of stay mentally switched on and motivated for training?
Whenever I've like needed a day or needed to skip something or whatever, that it's usually in my head, I'm thinking it's going to be more beneficial for me to just like take this stress off of me and rest and chill out, more than like that's going to be more beneficial than I'm incredibly stressed, I'm upset, I'm not in a good head place, but I'm going to like power through this work, and it's probably going to be like really subpar and like not good results. So for me, I choose the first one, because that is I think that's gonna help me more than being like in a really bad headspace and trying to do a workout. Because then I'll also get frustrated that I performed really poorly. So it's just like kind of all these negatives stacked on top of each other, or I can just be like, take a second, move on, rest, like come back at it another time.
That's good. Yeah, I think a lot of people end up going into that trap where they basically end up training and having subpar results, and it adds to the frustration. Do you think that you having a lot of different things in your lifestyle switched on in terms of like sleep, nutrition, stress management and those things. Do you think that allows you to take a little bit more of that attitude whereby you're more process oriented rather than outcome oriented and focusing on, I've just got to make sure I get the best training session in every single day, and then the rest will take care of itself?
What are you actually asking? Sorry.
So the question is, do you think the lifestyle factors or the things that you've made changes to, do you think it makes those decisions a lot easier for you to be like, okay, I'm going to take today off?
Oh, absolutely. Because I think that I'm able to focus on like bigger picture, and kind of making sure that I know where I want to end up. And so being able to kind of like separate and focus on the greater good of what I want to do is kind of what helps me make those other decisions at the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about this kind of 2020 season. What has been your approach, your plan in terms of what events you wanted to do, how you wanted to approach the Open, things like that?
Going back to how I wanted to approach the Open?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think for the 2019 Open, that was in March, we weren't really focusing on that at all with my training. So that was more of just kind of a chill Open. And I saw how decent I did. I think I was like 135th at the end of that Open. And I was like, oh, shit. Like, that's decent. That's pretty good for like not having a focus on the Open and like redoing all the workouts and all that stuff. So I think going into the 2020 Open, that was going to be like our focus with you, John. Like, you knew that like Open workouts are pretty good for me, and that was going to be what we're going to go after and peak for and everything. So I had decent expectations for myself, but I was just kind of like, all right, like, let's see what happens. And, over the course of that Open, I was like, oh man, like this is getting real. And to see that end result was pretty incredible. And so waiting for that result was stressful after the process of the whole Open, and then waiting to get an official invite for the games and everything. So once we figured out that I had officially qualified, then it was like, okay, like what sanctionals do we want to do? And I got invited to West Coast Classic, which was really cool. I wasn't necessarily expecting that. And now, seeing how many, there's going to be a lot of fit people there. So just going to see how I can stack up, because I haven't done many big individual competitions. Like, I did regionals, but kind of back at regionals, I was just like showing up and participated. I didn't feel like I really showed up to compete. And so, I did Wadapalooza on a team of 3. That was a big competition. And so I got a little bit more competitive experience. And then the only other individual competition I've done last year was Granite Games. And there were definitely some really good athletes there, but not to the caliber that like West Coast Classic is going to have. And so with West Coast being this first big one, I'm just kind of like, okay, like let's see where I'm at. And also have the attitude of like, I'm a decent athlete. I can, go and compete and not just like hang out and be like, this is cool. This is a good experience. When there's workouts that are good for me, to be able to like go and attack them. And then I'm doing one other sanctional, the Mid-Atlantic CrossFit Challenge in DC in April. And then after that, I'm only going to be focusing on training for the games.
Do you, how do you sort of view your training? Like you've obviously had competitions that you tried to peak for, you've had the Open, things like that. Do you sort of look at your training week as being like, okay, just another training week, or are you sort of are you the type of athlete that pays a little bit more attention to the nitty gritty details of, you know, how's the program periodized? You know, what is it leading to? What type of phase are we in? Like, how much attention do you pay? How much attention do you? How much do you pay attention to that type of stuff compared to just what you have to do on the day?
I would say I'm definitely pretty low key when it comes to like what my training is going to look like. Are you shaking your head, John?
Oh, yeah, that was sorry.
So I'll talk to John and be like, hey, like, what are we kind of focusing on? Like, what for this next training period? And then I'll just, you know, look at my programming and be like, okay, like, let's go. Like, let's have a good day. And, I would say I'm not super into like the nitty gritty of what I'm doing. I like have full trust in John that he's gonna program whatever he needs to program for me. And I think we have a really good relationship, because if I am in training and I start noticing that like, oh my God, I am terrible at this, or like this went miserably, or I make sure I pay attention to like how I'm doing, because then I can relay that information to John to be like, oh, I need to work on this. This was really bad. Or like, hey, I actually feel better with this, and things like that. So having that relationship with John is helpful to, like, I trust everything that he programs for me. And then, you know, when I feel like there's something that I need to like focus on or whatever, I'll just be like, hey, this is something I've been noticing recently or whatever.
And a question to you, John, how do you sort of take on that feedback, and then how do you weave it into the program, or do you just sort of ignore all the text messages? I mean, like,
John
gets a lot of text messages from me.
I filter the information. It's you know, I mean, you have to an extent, because there'll be some things where something didn't go well in training, or she thinks she's bad at something, and the reality is she's either just out of practice or it was just a bad day. And there are also times when I see kind of a false peak, where it's like something that went really well, and it's like, that's good, but I know it's not consistently as good as that performance. And that's where it's kind of, you know, you have to keep looking at the big picture as well as the individual details, because a single day in the gym, either good or bad, doesn't necessarily reflect where something is at, whether it's a movement, whether it's a type of workout, whether it's overall fitness. And I'm very good at ignoring when she complains about stuff she doesn't like.
I don't think I complain that much.
How did that ruck run go today?
I haven't done it yet.
What did you text me before the podcast?
If I could do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
But you didn't respond.
Yeah, take a hint.
Thanks for listening. While you're here, go ahead and head over to your podcast player, subscribe to the show, give it a rating, give it a review, all that good stuff. You can also go ahead and click through to the show notes, where you can find out more about us at legionsc.com, and also follow us on Instagram at legion.sc.